Do you feel like you speak but are not heard in your marriage? Have you ever had that feeling of being in a dialogue where only you seem to be trying to connect, while the other person seems to be miles away, even though they are right there by your side? Just yesterday, I received a message from a follower that left me thinking. She put it this way: "It feels like we speak different languages at home. I try to explain how I feel, but he just doesn't understand. And when he speaks, it feels like it's not meant for me." And that kept echoing in my head, because I know it's not an isolated case. The truth is that many couples go through this every day, a subtle disconnection, which starts with small noises in communication and grows, until it becomes a wall that is difficult to break down. And maybe, if you're here watching this video, it's because somewhere inside you this also makes sense. So answer me honestly. Have you ever felt this way too? Comment below just one "me," just so I know that you're with me in this conversation, because what we're going to talk about here today goes far beyond tips or techniques. It's about saving something precious before it's lost. It's about understanding the mistakes that we make without realizing it, and that little by little undermine what matters most: emotional connection. And look, you can take a deep breath, because this video is not to judge you. It is to open your eyes. It's a heart-to-heart conversation. So stay with me until the end, because maybe today you will understand why the words you say are not being heard, and more importantly, how to change that. Shall we go together? You know that moment when something hurts you, bothers you, and you feel a knot in your chest, but instead of talking, you choose silence. Maybe because you've tried before and it didn't work, or because you feel that if you have to explain, it loses its meaning. So you cross your arms, change your tone, make that silence full of meaning, hoping that he, by magic, intuition, or emotional obligation, realizes that you're upset. And then what happens? He just turns on the TV, and you feel that emptiness. A mixture of anger and frustration takes over. How can he not notice? How can he ignore it? And that's where the wound begins. It's not what he did, it's what he didn't see. But here is a point that hurts to hear, but that needs to be said with great care. Many times he really didn't understand, not because he doesn't care, but because he hasn't learned to read your signals the same way you read his. And this, unfortunately, is much more common than we would like to admit. The problem with waiting for someone else to guess what you feel is that you put your emotions in the hands of someone who may not even have the emotional tools to understand what is happening. And when it fails, because it will fail, you feel invisible. It's as if your pain has been ignored, when in fact it just hasn't been communicated clearly. This is not your fault nor his. This is a communication mistake that most couples make. We grow up with the romantic idea that when someone loves us, they will know exactly how we feel. That goes without saying, just look. And this thought, as beautiful as it may seem, is one of the biggest saboteurs of relationships. Because loving is not guessing. To love is to ask, to say, to open up with vulnerability. And I know it's not easy. There is fear involved. There is pride. There is tiredness. But holding on to what you feel, waiting for someone else to find out, is like screaming for help with the microphone turned off, and then demand that no one heard. How many times has this happened to you? Think calmly. You don't need to answer now, but keep that question with you. Because when you start to reflect on how many times you waited for him to guess, you realize how frustrated you were, and how much this made you even more distant from him. And it is this emotional distance that gradually cools the relationship, not because the love is over, but because communication has become a game of guesswork. And games, you know, have winners and losers, when really you should be on the same team. Real intimacy is born when we have the courage to say, "I'm upset. I felt ignored. I needed you to look at me." It looks simple, but it's powerful. Because when you speak, you give the other person the chance to understand you, to welcome you, to truly be present. And it is in this space that the bond strengthens. So if this excerpt touched you, breathe, reflect, and if you feel it in your heart, comment below what this moment meant to you. Sometimes what you write can help someone else who is also trying to be heard in the silence. And when pain speaks louder than love, when anger takes the place of calm, and our need to be heard turns into a weapon against those we love most. This is such a common and at the same time so silent mistake within relationships. Talking to hurt, not to resolve. In the heat of emotion, in an argument, we say that stupid phrase, that sarcastic comment, that "you always do that," or the terrible "you never understand me." And at the time, it seems like we're just reacting. But what we're actually doing is shooting, because in times of anger, words become arrows. And the arrow, even if removed, leaves a wound. Maybe you didn't even have that intention, but when we talk on impulse, wanting to protect ourselves, we often end up hurting more than defending ourselves. And the problem is that the emotional wound is not like a cut on the finger, which heals quickly. It stays there, open, invisible, and it hurts again with each new argument, with each new arrow launched. And this cycle is dangerous because it repeats itself and becomes normalized. Communication turns into a battlefield where each conversation becomes a dispute over who is most right, who shouts the loudest, who remembers the most mistakes from the past. But deep down, it's not a question of reason, but of lack, of accumulated hurt, of pain that was not treated with care. Sometimes we just want to be validated, we just want to hear, "I understand how you feel." But since no one has learned to do this, we end up attacking to see if the other finally understands. But in this attack, the connection is broken. And little by little, what was love turns into resistance. That's where love starts to hide, because the heart is closing. And when we most need to get closer, that's when we move away the most. The person you wanted to share your life with becomes the person you protect yourself from emotionally. Have you noticed this happening? Have you ever felt like you said something just to hurt, even without meaning to? If so, just leave an emoji in the comments. It is a symbol, but it is also a recognition, and recognizing it is the first step to change. The truth is that no one taught us how to fight with respect. We learned to shut up or explode, but there is a middle ground, conscious dialogue. When you speak not to win, but to be understood, when you express what you feel without pointing fingers, without labeling others, because resolving a conflict is not about showing that the other person made a mistake. It's about showing how you felt about it. "I felt rejected when you didn't text me back" is very different from "you ignore me because you don't care about me." The first sentence opens space for connection. The second closes all doors. And I know it hurts to have to choose the path of calm when everything inside you wants to scream. But this is the kind of force that transforms relationships. It's not weakness, it's emotional maturity. It's love in practice. So the next time you feel like throwing that verbal arrow, breathe, step away for a moment, and ask yourself, what do I really want from this conversation? Hurt or resolve? Because sometimes what separates a couple is not a lack of love, but an excess of words spoken without conscience. And yes, we can learn to change. Can you imagine what your relationship would be like if, instead of wounds, every conversation left bridges? Keep that image there. And if this part of the video spoke to you, share it. Someone you know may need this reflection too. They sat at the table facing each other, but the distance between them was enormous. Not physical, but emotional. He said, "She complains too much." She said, "He never listens to me." And so the days passed, trapped in a cycle where no one really listened to the other. They were just waiting for their turn to respond. Each sentence became a trigger. Every conversation is a dispute. And deep down, what she wanted was to be listened to with affection. And what he needed was to be understood without being attacked, but neither of them knew how to do that, because truly listening is not just staying silent while the other person speaks. Real listening requires presence, attention, genuine interest, Listening is putting your cell phone aside, your pride too, and really trying to understand what the other person is saying, even if it hurts, even if you disagree. But how often do we think we're listening, when in reality we're just waiting for our turn to speak? And worse, how many times do we listen with a filter, already thinking about defense, the response, the counterattack? Communication becomes a monologue disguised as dialogue. When one doesn't listen and the other gets tired of trying to explain, the relationship loses its color. It withers away. It becomes automatic. Conversations become to-do lists. Silences become longer. And affection becomes a rarity. And this all starts when we stop really listening, when we stop looking each other in the eye, asking how the day was and really wanting to know the answer, when we no longer ask, "Are you okay?" And if you ask, you already wait for the "I'm" on autopilot. And at this rate, the connection slowly dies. And the worst thing is that it's not always bad. Sometimes routine swallows you, emotional fatigue accumulates. But even so, there is still a choice. There is always a choice. The choice to listen before responding, to welcome before correcting. Realize that behind a complaint, there is often a poorly communicated request for love. She says she's tired of the mess, but what she really wants is help. He says he is being asked too much, but what he really wants is to feel valued. And this can only be understood when we listen with our hearts and not just with our ears. If no one listens, who speaks from the heart? This question seems simple, but it carries immense depth. Because in the end, most conflicts in relationships are not born from malice, but from poor communication, of bottled feelings, of misinterpreted words, with ears closed by old sorrows. What is often missing is not love, it is listening, active listening, empathetic listening, non-judgmental listening. The listening that welcomes, that says, "I'm here, you can talk." And believe me, when someone feels truly heard, even the pain lessens, the anger subsides, pride gives room for getting closer, and then the love, which was hidden behind the noise of arguments, begins to appear again. Therefore, if you feel that conversations with your partner have become more of a fight than a connection, perhaps the first step is not to change what you say, but how you listen, because listening is the first act of love. And sometimes all the other person needs is to know that they have space to exist within the relationship, with their flaws, their pain, and their requests. You don't need to answer anything now, just feel it for a moment. And if this pause touched you, stay with me until the end, because we still have something important to talk about, the silence that screams in relationships. Sometimes the biggest noise in a marriage is silence, not the silence of peace, of the comfort of being next to someone you love without having to say anything. But the silence is heavy, the silence that carries unspoken hurts, swallowed frustrations, accumulated disappointments, that silence that comes at the end of an unresolved discussion, or when the routine has taken up so much space that there is no longer any space for looking, for touching, for true listening. It is the silence that screams loudly in the heart of those who want to feel seen, but feel like they are disappearing within the relationship. The house may be full of noise, TV on, cell phone vibrating, pan on the fire, but what really resonates is what isn't being said. And this sonic void, this lack of connection, is what most corrodes a relationship from within, because it's a type of abandonment that you don't see, but you feel it all the time. And you know what's cruelest? This silence often comes after many attempts to speak, to express yourself, to ask for attention, affection, care. But when these attempts are ignored or misunderstood, the person gives up. Keep quiet, and silence becomes a defense, a shield, emotional protection, but it also becomes a wall, a high wall which separates what was once so close. And this wall doesn't appear overnight. It is built brick by brick, each interrupted conversation, each criticism not accompanied by empathy, each time the other chose the cell phone instead of looking. And when you realize there is no longer any dialogue, only obligations, there is no longer any affection, just coexistence. And at that point, the person begins to wonder, where did the love go? But the truth is that he didn't disappear. He just got stuck on the other side of the silence. There is a pain that doesn't need screaming to be felt. It lives in the eyes that avoid looking, in the bodies that sleep together but turn away, in the short and dry messages of everyday life. It's the pain of disconnection. And the hardest part is that from the outside, everything looks fine. The two continue to fulfill their roles, taking care of the house, the children, the routine. But inside, it's as if they live in parallel worlds. This is the silence that screams the most. And he doesn't need words to hurt, because when silence invades a relationship that once had dialogue, affection and presence, it comes with the weight of everything that once was and stopped being. So breathe. Feel this moment calmly. You don't need to react now. Just observe if this silence also lives there, among you, and if you live, recognizing it is a start, because before rebuilding the connection you need to see where it was lost, and that begins in silence. But look, no one is born knowing how to communicate. No one is born ready to deal with others, with love, with friction, with the pressure of routine, with our own traumas that we carry from childhood and end up projecting without realizing it. Communication in a relationship is not a gift, it is a skill. And like every skill, it can be learned, adjusted, refined. The good news is that it doesn't have to be perfect, it needs to be present, and everything can change with small adjustments. In truth, sometimes a change in posture, a new way of listening, a question asked with genuine interest already transforms the atmosphere between the couple. The most powerful thing is to understand that relationships are a daily construction. There is no magic, but there is consciousness, there is choice. And if you're here until now, it's because in some way you've already started this change. Just by stopping to reflect on this, you're already 2 steps ahead of many people who haven't yet realized that silence is screaming inside the house. So let me give you a practical, simple tip that has a profound effect: active listening with validation of feelings. It works like this. The next time your partner brings up something that bothers you or makes you want to respond, stop for a second and respond with 3 magic words. Tell me more. Just that. It seems small, but it changes the game. This phrase opens up space. She shows real interest. After that, instead of defending yourself or justifying yourself, try saying something like, "I understand this hurt your feelings." Even if you don't agree 100%, this validation shows respect. And where there is respect, there is a chance for reconnection. Active listening is not just listening with your ears, it is listening with your heart. It's not interrupting. It's not trying to fix someone else's pain right away. It's letting the other person feel and showing that you're there. Gift, no judgment. Just this small adjustment can transform a conversation that would otherwise turn into a fight, into a moment of intimacy. Because deep down, we don't want to win an argument. We want to feel safe within it. Start slowly. It starts with a calmer conversation, with more attentive listening, with a clearer intention. The idea is not to become an expert in communication overnight, but rather to start creating an environment where both can be who they are, with space to fail, learn, and improve together. This is mature love. This is conscious relationship. And if this made sense to you, comment "cleared" down here. Not because I need to know, but because when you write, you record. You reinforce this commitment to yourself. And who knows, maybe someone else will be inspired by seeing your comment too. Because at the end of the day, we're all here, trying to understand each other, trying to be better for those we love, and it all really starts with small attitudes. A new look, a more generous listening, a less harsh word, a different choice, a real presence. It's possible. You can do it. And now that it's clear, let's go to the next step together. A marriage does not die for lack of love. He dies most of the time due to lack of conversation, due to lack of presence, for swallowed words and accumulated feelings, for that desire to express yourself that is being silenced by the fear of the other's reaction, by tiredness, by the routine that suffocates spontaneity. And the saddest thing is that most couples still love each other, but they no longer know how to access that love. It is hidden behind misunderstandings, noise in communication, unclear responses, pride, lack of listening. But love is still there, asking for help, wanting to return to the surface. And sometimes all he needs is a new channel of dialogue, a gesture of reconnection, a conversation with less pressure and more empathy. When communication within a relationship changes, everything changes. The energy changes. Intimacy grows again. And that feeling of being alone even with someone starts to disappear. Because being heard, welcomed, and respected is what keeps a relationship alive, much more than any "I love you" said out of obligation. So, if you've come this far, it's because something inside you wants this transformation. And that is already a huge step. Always remember, relationships don't destroy themselves overnight, and they also don't heal overnight. But each conscious choice, each word spoken with more presence, each listening offered with an open heart, is already part of the healing. And sometimes it all starts with the courage to recognize where you are also going wrong, not to blame yourself, but to change. Now, if this conversation touched you, if you felt it made sense, share this video with someone who also needs to hear this today. Someone you know is going through a difficult time in their relationship, and tell me below, in all sincerity, which of these errors do you feel appears most among you? You don't need to write much. Just one comment helps keep this exchange space alive, because what we don't say weighs heavily, but what we share frees us. So write, reflect, and take with you this pill of wisdom. Love doesn't end. It shuts up. And when we learn to listen, he speaks again.